You are watching The Horizon, the voice of the Amber Woman, exclusively on ABC Amber TV.
Mutumbu, mama yo, na ya boy go get her. Blue Jay Brothers. Mama you kind, mama you're beautiful, mama you good, mama you're wonderful. No woman like you, mama. No woman like you, mama. Thank God for you, mama. Thank God for you, mama. 'Cause you gave me life, oh mama. Queen of my life, oh mama. I go love you for life, oh mama. 'Cause you love me so, oh mama. From small beginning, I never forget all the suffer when you suffer for me. Oh yeah, yeah. All the pain and the troubles where I put you through. I remember when money no be there and chop no be there for her. You be the try your best. You go run around to find us something where we go chop. When I dey sick, you know the sleep. You go dey cry all night. You go hold me tight, start to pray, say God make you help my baby. Oh Lord, ooh, I wo ye choma. Afunga na bere ye funga choma. Ambama na bere ye ambama choma. Enga na chinum ye ga choma. Mama, I wo ye choma. Afunga na bere ye funga choma. Ambama na bere ye ambama choma. Enga na chinum ye ga choma. Ye ga choma, mama. Enga na chinum ye ga choma. Chinum ye ga choma. Oh, you gave me life, oh mama. Queen of my life, oh mama. I will love you for life, oh mama. 'Cause you love me so, oh mama. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, shekelelelele. Ale mama, you're my motivation. You gave me the best education, mama. The song where I sing I'm for you, now it's special dedication to you. Oh yeah, I know say every night and day you pray say make a mama. The God where you the pray I'm for heaven, don't give me this inspiration, mama. The song where I sing I'm for you, now to show my appreciation to you. Ubi awo ye choma, afunga na bere ye funga choma, ambama na bere ye ambama choma, enga na chinum ye ga choma. Mama awo ye choma, afunga na bere ye funga choma, ambama na bere ye ambama choma, enga na chinum ye ga choma, chinum ye ga choma. Chinum ye ga choma, ye ga choma. You gave me life, oh mama. Queen of my life, queen of my life. I will love you for life. I will love you for life. 'Cause you love me so, oh mama. You gave me life, oh mama. Queen of my life, mama. I will love you for life, oh mama. 'Cause you love me so, oh mama. Selelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, shekelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama, selelelele. Ale mama. Oh, that's so. That's so. Mother's Day. That's so.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to The Horizon, the voice of the Amber Woman. This is Dr. Patience Abiedu. You popularly know me as Ma Patience, your host for today. We have two great topics to share with you. Please, as you join, share the link, invite friends and family, all over so they can watch this great show we have planned for you today. The topics today have to do with 20th May, the day we call Fake Unity Day, the fraudulent day in the history of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. We also have on our menu a continuation of the topic we started last week, the Kerman seminar talking about peace in the Anglophone, in Southern Cameroon's Anglophone crisis. The continuation is important because we'll be talking about the Q&A that was discussed during that seminar. And this is a perfect day because we have Barrister Ghana who will be addressing those Q&A. Without further ado, let me first of all congratulate the previous program on ABC where we had, that was hosted by Paddy King and Ma Rachel. And we had three great panelists, Barrister Fru, Barrister Beiseha, and Professor Ayim, educating our people about 20th May and the ramifications. We'll have the same topic today. Believe me, you'll hear this from another point of view, another perspective, because we have Barrister Ghana on our show. So without further ado, I want to invite Barrister Ghana to say hello to our viewers, to our audience, and we'll continue the show. Welcome to The Horizon, Barrister Ghana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abiedu, for hosting me on this show. Thank you very much for the great work that you do in fostering the cause of this revolution, in promoting the cause of freedom, in educating our people, in sensitizing the world about our plight. Much appreciated. On behalf of the whole of Ambazonia and all freedom-loving people of the world, I want to sincerely thank you. And thank you. Maybe I should thank myself for having great instincts to match my outfit with yours. So
it's as if we planned it.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you so much, and welcome to The Horizon. So I have this, because of time, I have this document in front of me that I want to read. It's going to be like a monologue. I will read this for a while, but I'm sure you're going to be getting some notes and merge the ideas with what you've come to talk to us about. And this is a document from this pamphlet. It's called The Restoration of the State of West Cameroon. This was written 32 years ago. And it says 20th May, National Day. What significance? So I want people to understand this as something written 32 years ago. And we are talking about it today in the same context or in a different context. So let me read, please bear with me. And because it's long, I'm going to probably read and stop and have you have an opportunity to say something, and then I continue. I think that would be the best way to do it.
Sounds fair.
Okay, here we go. 20th May, National Day. What significance? Cameroon 72 has constantly celebrated annually 20th May as Cameroon's National Day. What does a national day represent to a nation? And what does 20th May represent to Cameroon? People can't celebrate a national day without belonging to a nation. What then consists of a nation to which a national day is dedicated? A nation can be defined as any of the following: an aggregation of persons of the same ethnic family, speaking the same language or cognate languages, occupying a definite territory and organized under one government, especially a sovereign government, or a body of people associated with a particular territory who are sufficiently conscious of their unity to seek or possess a government peculiarly their own. When a day is assigned to a particular purpose or observance in commemoration of some event, it definitely reflects history. Unfortunately, with the case of Cameroon, and according to the leaders and government, history seems to be of irrelevant importance, as the official ceremonies usually observed by the government do not truly signify the actual historic past, but merely represent distorted facts of historical events. This ironic attitude of the former and present leaders of Cameroon has become more or less a custom in our society and has morally led almost everyone astray to the point where this distortion has perverted the minds of Cameroonians into believing in the false, crooked, and deformed history of Cameroon. History, the branch of knowledge dealing with the past events and especially events in connection with the human race, must be preserved by all concerned without the slightest alteration. The Cameroon government and the leaders have employed assorted unscrupulous methods to impose a fabricated and counterfeit history on the Cameroonians with the purpose of justifying by deceit their illegal operations and activities. This act of feigning in Cameroon dates as far back as the last years of the Cameroon colonial administration and the post-colonial era. I will end here for now so that Barrister Ghana can say something before I continue. Barrister, you heard the beginning comment talking about a nation. What is a nation? How do you celebrate a day as a nation? And what is a nation? Please go ahead and comment.
How do you celebrate a day as a day of a nation? What is a nation? How does that write-up from the past speak to us in the present? What does 20th day mean? See, when I was growing up as a primary school kid back in Cameroon, I don't know what got into me that I was already so conscious of our history that even in primary school, they used to sing this song, 20th May Referendum, National Day, Cameroon. And I would always almost throw up from hearing those songs, because those songs were such a fraud upon us and such a fraud upon our psyche. What is 20th May to us as Ambazo? To French Cameroonians, 20th day is a day of lies. It's a day of fraud. It's a day of deceit. It's a day of attempts to fasten the chains of our slavery, to fasten the chains of recolonization of the erstwhile Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonia. 20th May is a day that stands as a towering reminder that French Cameroon and France never intended for any union to take place. Because in their own fraudulent constitution of 1961, which they call the Federal Constitution, Article 47 of that constitution basically says nothing should be done to change the federal character of the nation. And so, how do you then move on to 1972, where you are holding a referendum on the whole territory to change the country from Federal Republic of Cameroon to United Republic of Cameroon? And so it is a lie that stands as a towering reminder that that kind of fraud on a people will not stand. And 20th May, standing as a towering reminder, is a replica of the guns blazing in Ambazonia and the bombs going off on French Cameroon troops, reminding those thieves in Yaoundé that the fraud that was perpetuated on the Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonia, will not stand.
Wow. Thank you so much, Barrister Ghana. Thank you. Let me read on. If one goes through the history of Cameroon, according to Amadou Ahidjo, one shouldn't be surprised to learn that the origins of Cameroon history begin with when he was installed in the helm of the government in 1958 by de Gaulle's colonial administration. No chapters will be reserved for political oppositions parties which he ruthlessly eliminated with the assistance of his French masters. Personalities who contributed much towards French Cameroon's independence from France, such as Dr. Felix Roland Momi, U.M. Mwobe, Ernest Wandi, etc., will never be. The historic trial on treason against Bishop Ndongmu, Ernest Wandi, and others will not figure in Ahidjo's Cameroon's history. The history of Cameroon, according to Paul Biya, obviously begins in November 1982 when he became president. Even if he obliged to mention French Cameroon's independence, his narration and distorted facts will give the impression that Cameroon was non-existent or hadn't any history between 1960 and 1982, as anything associated with Ahidjo will not feature in his history book. Even the famous trial on treason charges against Ahidjo, Salatu, and others, which led to the defenders being sentenced to death, will not appear in Biya's history of Cameroon. The history of the state of West Cameroon, as from 1961, written by the Cameroon government and according to the French-speaking leaders of Cameroon, is one of interwoven historical events with fiction. Inasmuch as all the major events are misrepresented, coupled with the deliberate omission of facts, which have only helped to facilitate their misconstrued acts and fraudulent intentions. From history, let's now delve to the National Day, its origin and significance. Cameroon since 1960 has observed numerous national days at various epochs and have been marked by distinctive events. When French Cameroon gained independence from France on 1st January 1960, 1st January was thenceforth celebrated as French Cameroon's National Day or Independence Day. On the 2nd of February 1961, during the United Nations sponsored plebiscite in southern Cameroon, in order to determine the future of the territory, the English-speaking Southern Cameroonians decided to achieve independence by joining the Independent Republic of Cameroon, following the unification of Southern Cameroon and the Republic of Cameroon, which gave birth to the Federal Republic on the 1st of October 1961. So under the Federal Republic of Cameroon, two federated states, West Cameroon and East Cameroon, jointly commemorated the following events. 1st January was celebrated as Independence Day, the day East Cameroon gained independence from France in 1960. 11 February has been celebrated since 1965. Although this day represents the day of historic decision taken by Southern Cameroonians, the state of West Cameroon, during the United Nations organized plebiscite, the Francophone-led government of Cameroon has intentionally misrepresented the historical event and has imposed the commemoration of 11 February in honor of the National Youth Day. 1st October was celebrated as Unification Day, which signified the unification of the states of Southern Cameroon and the Republic of 1961, and the Republic of Cameroon in 1961. Let's now deal with the nation in question. Barrister Ghana, after I read this paragraph, I'll let you speak. Let's now deal with the nation in question. As Stated earlier, people can not observe a national day without belonging to a particular nation. To which nations were those commemorative events dedicated to? Following our definition of a nation and from the above historical facts and events, it is evident that we are dealing with two communities or two distinct groups of body of people who are associated with a particular territory, each and are organized under different governments which are peculiarly their own. Over to you.
Dr. Abiedu, very, very interesting read up there. And when you started with this second litany, you referenced some of the heroes of French Cameroon who were mercilessly assassinated by France using their proxy, Ahidjo. You talked about Ahidjo and his own perception of Cameroonian history, and Biya also thinking that the history of French Cameroon started in 1982 when he took over power. When you talked about people like Yobe, Ernest Wandi, Dr. Felix Momi, Paul Ndongmo, and all of those heroes of the UPC who fought to gain independence in French Cameroon, it brings a throwback to an attempt that has been made to muzzle African countries. And we're getting past that chapter. We're getting past that chapter where those who truly sought for independence and fought for independence were denied the right to take. Stooges could be offered or could be ushered into power. That throws us back to the example of Zaire, where Lumumba, who fought with the Congolese to gain independence, was killed in favor of the traitor Mobutu Sese Seko, just like in Cameroon, where the French went and picked a telephone clerk from northern Cameroon called Amadou Ahidjo, formed a party called UC, Union Camerounaise, threw support around him and used the army of French Cameroon to butcher the UPC and hoist that fraud onto French Cameroon. How all of this history relates to Ambazonia and how it to try to slice and dice different dates for National Day, different dates for Independence Day, the inability of French Cameroon to celebrate its true Independence Day, which is January 1st. All speak to a dysfunctionality in a nation. I've always said that when the first button of your shirt is wrongly buttoned, everything else is going to be crooked. And this crookedness that you see characterizing French Cameroon is because they try to hold Ambazonia down. Go to Yaoundé, in a nation awash with resources, in a nation awash with talents. There is no regular running water. There's no regular electricity. The roads are filled with potholes. People steal money and build mansions, and a few houses down the street, you see piles of garbage, stinking piles of garbage. There is corruption from end to end, front and back. The priorities are being misplaced. So this whole crookedness is not just resigned to their inability to separate their own day of independence. It's resigned to the whole body politic of the nation. We hear of the way they murdered the journalist Martinez Nzogo, killing a human being worse than you would kill an animal, decapitating his genitals, removing his nails, peeling his skin off, removing his teeth. That kind of barbarism again speaks of seeds from the root that has been planted in their attempt to suppress Ambazonia's own independence. So I've always said it, and the whites have always said it. French Cameroon is not going anywhere in the light of progressive nations, because when you try to hold somebody else down, guess what? You're consigned to being down. Another case in point. A former KGB officer called Vladimir Putin decided that it was such a bright idea to try to hold Ukraine down. And he sent in his forces to suppress Ukraine's own sovereignty, just like French Cameroon is trying to suppress Ambazonia's sovereignty. We have over 200 Russians killed. The whole military has been decimated. Productive people within Russia are being killed. Enterprising people are falling off from balconies. Why? Just because a nation chooses to do the wrong thing. Just as French Cameroon has chosen to do the wrong thing in Ambazonia. So this dysfunctionality within French Cameroon is something that is going to continue. And it's going to continue in quantum leaps until Ambazonia is free. And mark my words, Ambazonia will be. In fact, Ambazonia is already free. Ambazonia is already independent. Ambazonians around the world are already sensitized. We are a nation unto ourselves. And the restoration forces on the ground have decided to take the bombs and the bullets and whatever they can fight with to pursue the restoration of our independence. So within the background of the echo of this 20th May, a day of lies, a day of fraud, a day of deceit, a day of attempts to fasten the chains of our recolonization, they are only inviting more dysfunctionality onto themselves.
Talking about dysfunctionality, I think that word is just a perfect point for me to continue with this, because it really explains the dysfunctionality of French Cameroon. From the historical events as from 1960 and under the Federal Republic of Cameroon, it is evident that the commemoration of 1st January was in honor of a nation, the Republic of Cameroon, which was later transferred to the state of East Cameroon. The observance of 11th February was in honor of a nation, Southern Cameroon, which was later transformed to the state of West Cameroon. The commemoration of 1st October by the Federal Republic of Cameroon was in honor of two nations, the state of West Cameroon and East Cameroon. These historical events were genuinely observed annually by the two nations until 1972, when a strange phenomenon occurred in the Federal Republic of Cameroon. And it is definitely the adverse effect of that strange phenomenon which completely devastated the constitutional institutions of the Federation and which have illegally brought about the institutionalization of these distorted historical events that are presently being commemorated officially. In June 1972, the President of the Federal Republic, Amadou Ahidjo, representing the Senate of East Cameroon, repudiated the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon. Following the maliciously organized May 20th referendum by Ahidjo in 1972, the legal institutions and states and the constitutional governments of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, as well as those of the Federated States of East Cameroon and West Cameroon, were all swept away by the mere proclamation of a presidential dictatorial order number DF 72-270 of June 2nd, 1972. Ahidjo, with his self-imposed imperial powers and acting like a rogue, misused the office of the President of the Federal Republic and stage managed a fraudulent referendum on the 20th of May, 1972, which he styled the Peaceful Revolution. Over to you, Barrister. The Peaceful Revolution.
Thing we know of Ahidjo, especially from 1961 right until about 1979, 1980. Ahidjo was a stooge of the French. And I just want to highlight something. When you go against your own people in lies, in deceit, in fraud, you actually end up as a coward. And as you can see what happened to Ahidjo due to his whole litany of deceit, he ended up dying as a dog in Senegal, buried away from the land of his birth, being a shame unto himself. Ahidjo is not the only one. If you look at somebody like Blaise Compaoré, who became a stooge of the French and masterminded or became subservient to the French mastermind in killing Thomas Sankara in 1987. He lives now as a wretched, disgraced person, begging for his own death. If you look at somebody like Mobutu Sese Seko, who became subservient to imperialist interests, killing an African hero. See, you can amass all of that wealth for a while. You can bask in all of that glory for a while. You can, like in the case of Zaï, build and uphold statues in his village called Badolite. In the end, unless you stand for truth, unless you seek justice, unless you seek development that truly emancipates the people, you are fighting a losing battle. And one of the reasons that keeps that diaper-wearing octogenarian from leaving power is because he knows, and I'm talking about Paul Bivoundo, he knows that he is consigned to the dustbin of history because he has stood for injustice. And there are times when they say, out of abundance of the heart, what happens? The mouth speaks. Like when he had the interview with Mo Ibrahim, and he had to voice it out that we have tried to assimilate these people, and it has not worked. Now, when the head tyrant professes that it has not worked, the head tyrant has all the intelligence to know if it's working and to know if it has any chance of working. But when the head tyrant says it has not worked, he has, if you flip that coin, the other side of that coin basically says the people who were trying to suppress and oppress and recolonize and annex are free because it has not worked. So Ahidjo failed in all his actions because the only thing that Ahidjo cared about was power. And even when the French tricked him to hand over power to this lackey and underachiever called Biya, what happened? He tried to come back. He gave over the executive leadership of the state, but stayed as the president of CZNU, and through those machinations tried. So when you're lost is only for power, you are doomed to fail. We see that in some of the leaders of this struggle. We see people whose lust are just for power. We see people running to Yaoundé, to some important, uncircumcised grand national dialogue. We see people rolling over themselves to head the bilingualism commission so that they can pocket a few francs. We see people rushing to Canada to commit themselves to some Canadian dialogue when French Cameroon has not given a written commitment to any dialogue. Because their lust is just for power. Because they just want their few seconds in the limelight. And when your lust is just for power, then you're consigned to the dustbin of history. So what that read up that you were saying is just reaffirming what we have seen over and over and over. There's more to life. And what people like you, Dr. Abiedu, are doing, what people like Dr. Sako are doing, what people like the genuine leaders of this struggle are doing, are putting their neck on the line to sort of liberate our people. I'm going to tell you a conversation that I had with my good friend, Mr. Claude Chi, who is now locked up, and we're doing everything we can to sort of free him, 2 years ago, one of the fake leaders of this struggle, I'm not going to mention his name, but one of the fake leaders of this struggle came and was touring the Midwest. He came to Kansas City, and then he traveled to Springfield, and then he visited twice. And Claude Chi and I were sort of thinking, we're talking. We said, what is this guy coming in the Midwest to do? Making 2 trips, And this was about 2021, I think. And we're scratching our heads trying to figure out what he was doing. It wasn't until 2022 when the coup plotters started manifesting themselves. And then we realized that this guy had actually been on the payroll, probably of La Republique, traveling around the country, trying to sense the leaders of the struggle to see where the weak points are. And when Claude and I sort of asked him, we were like, what are you coming to do? You are making so many trips to the Midwest. And he said, he's doing a research paper. And Claude and I just scratched our heads. And when we realized that he had been bought and was trying to sense the leaders of the struggle to see where the bidding could be to sell the struggle, Claude turned to me and Claude said something very, very profound. He said, Massa, Presi, if they really check say the fee buy, sell this revolution, or them say they check say the fee buy me and you too. They are genuine leaders of this struggle who are not in it for any dime, who are not in it for any notoriety. People like Sako who are committed to executing the will of the people. We have been blessed with genuine leaders, even in the midst of wolves, and we are on the path to freedom. Just like Ambassador Fossum said in that tape that was played at the end of the last show, endorsing Sako and endorsing what Sako is doing, endorsing the actions of the interim government to reinforce the firepower of the forces on the ground. We are a free people because with a shovel in one hand and an AK-47 on the other, the true restoration forces have decided to free our people. In the 60s, Ahidjo could collude with the French to butcher the Maquisards. That is not possible in 2023. And when they send their forces into the southern Cameroons, thinking that it was going to be 3 weeks and done, we are 6 years into this battle and they don't know their left from their right yet. So we, my dear doctor, are truly a free people.
Reading on, at this point, we will not subject to analysis the peaceful or violent nature of that perfidious event. But The most striking revelation is that Ahijah is conscious. By the way, this was written when Ahijah was still alive. But the most striking revelation is that Ahijah is conscious of his treacherous guilt and acknowledges the fact that his action and unfaithful conduct was tantamount to a revolution. A revolution is defined as a complete overthrow of an established government or political system. Be it peaceful or violent, what matters is the illegitimate quality of the 20th May incident, which is not in conformity with the federal constitution or the laws of the federated states. Ahijah instituted in Cameroon on June 2nd, 1972, a totalitarian regime under the banner of the United Republic of Cameroon, and his self-proclaimed achievement, which he had to capitalize upon as a result of his revolution, was the unity of the two states. Of what significance then was the previous unification of the two states, which the Federation had commemorated since 1961, whereby both states had officially observed 1st October for the past 10 years? Was the much proclaimed unity of 20th May designed to distort the historic events of the unification of October 1st, 1961? Or was it a desperate attempt to maliciously or despiciously conceal the genuine motives behind Ahijah's revolution, which were basically to destroy the state of West Cameroon and its government? Ahijah established a tyrannic government in his United Republic of Cameroon, in which absolute authority was only exercised by him. He never granted recognition or tolerance to parties of different opinion. He decreed 20th May as the National Day of the United Republic of Cameroon. 20th May henceforth replaced 1st January and 1st October as a result of Ahijah's despotic abuse of authority. Over to you, Barrister.
Very, very succinct read of that write-up, trying to put Ahijah's actions into context. And we are transitioning to a new Africa. We are in a different world when it comes to us Africans. The day when colonialists such as the French could go pick a telephone clerk and build some resources around him and make him president are over. The day when South Africa could try to wrap some forces around Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi and attempt to destabilize the ANC and perpetuate the lie of apartheid are over. The day when, if you look at a country like Togo, where the French could install their stooges and get away with whatever they tried to do, is over. In the text of Ahijah, I just want to read some or describe some emotions here about life regarding Ahijah, the 20th of May, the situation in Ambazonia. There are certain attributes or emotions that characterize how we go about life. There is the emotion of intelligence and wisdom. And when you see intelligence and wisdom, you should get close to it. There is the emotion of love. When you see love, reciprocate it, because it only helps that love grow. There is the attribute or the value of peace. When you see peace, welcome it. There is the emotion of foolishness. When you see foolishness, avoid it and leave it unto itself. There is the emotion or the attribute of stupidity. When you see stupidity, get out of its way. There is the emotion of barbarism and tyranny. And when you see barbarism and tyranny, fight it. Part of what Ahidjo did in French Cameroon through these machinations was sowing the seeds of stupidity, was sowing the seeds of foolishness, was sowing the seeds of barbarism and tyranny. And the only way you can deal with stupidity and foolishness is to get out of its way. French Cameroon has decided to wrap itself with stupidity and foolishness. And what we can do as Ambazonians is to get out of their way. It's their nation. It's a different nation. If they want to be stupid, so stupid that they can write a constitution in 1996 and not even be able to implement it, that's their business. If they want to be if French Cameroon wants to be so stupid that they don't even have the power to elect their own parliamentarians who would choose a senile leader of their parliament or of the Senate, let them stay with that foolishness. If French Cameroon wants to be so stupid that when they are steeped up in corruption and they take loans from the IMF and the World Bank and they cannot even repay them and they have to come with some structural adjustment program so that they can continue taking more loans, and they have to pop champagne to celebrate the restructuring of their loans, let them stay with their foolishness. But for us Ambazonians where barbarism and tyranny are being hoisted on us, as was said in the previous show, in the way they poison our people, such as in Bali, in the way they massacre our people, such as in Santa and Pinyin, in the way they kill and burn our children, such as in Gabo, in the way they send their operatives to go and shoot school children, such as in Kumba, in the way they burn villages, such as in over 400 villages in Cameroon, in the way they take our people who are innocent and have been arrested and jailed, and they take them and kill them in the dark of night, such as in Tole, such as in the prisons in Boya and Bamenda, and bury them in mass graves. That is tyranny, and we have no other choice but to fight it. And the international personalities do echo the fact that the status that we have in Cameroon cannot be tolerated, cannot be accepted. Thabo Nagy, in his much talked about interview, said something very peculiar, which maybe people did not realize it. What he said, Thabo Nagy said, Canada is the reverse. They have 80% French and 20%, they have 80% English and 20% French. And these are those of the Quebec area. And Thabo Nagy said, if what is being offered to Ambazonia in this bastardized talk of spatial status, in this bastardized talk of rearranging things so that we can devolve more power to the Northwest and Southwest, whatever regions. Thabo Nagy said, if this was being offered in Canada, Quebec will never accept it. So why should Ambazonians accept it? When we are an independent people, when we have UN resolutions such as 1608 and 1415, demonstrating the fact that we are a sovereign nation, are we children of a lesser God? So what Ahidjo did to sow these seeds of tyranny and foolishness and barbarism, made a rendezvous with us. Because when there's tyranny, we have to fight it. And some of these people who are trying to compromise, some of these people who are looking and trying to cash out, some of these people who are seeking notoriety, they make a mistake in thinking that this fight is consigned just to one generation. They make the mistake of thinking that if they go get the wrong deal with La République, it means this fight is over. Unless this struggle is settled, consistent, with our sovereignty that came out of the Decolonization Committee as mandated by UN Resolutions 1514 and 1608, unless it is settled consistent with the truth and the rule of law pregnant in those resolutions, the next generation and the next generation and tens of generations down the line will rise up to fight. And French Cameroon is not going to go anywhere because they are going to have to deal with that fight for generations. So as a people who have been called, as a people who have the rendezvous with history, as a people who we have brothers and sisters mounting weapons, defending themselves, we have the duty under international law to support them, because self-defense is a value recognized in any culture and in any legal jurisdiction.
Wow, Barrister, that's a lot of information. As you rightly say, water doesn't mix with oil. Water doesn't mix with oil. And the fact, as you said, those emotions that you mentioned, intelligence, foolishness, peace, love, tyranny, stupidity, that really differentiates who we are. The people that are Southern Cameroonians, that were Anglo-Saxons, have this Anglo-Saxon origin, are generally peace-loving people, are generally loving people, are generally, I hate to say that, intelligent people. And people from the other side, as their leaders have shown us, are tyrannic people, are barbaric, are foolish, because they let the same president do the same thing over and over again. So you cannot mix water with oil. And that's why this Unity Day is a fake day, because we don't believe in the same thing. We have different origins. One more thing, Barrister, before we transition to the other topic, to the next topic. There's some acclamation that this Unity Day was forced upon us by Hydro because they already saw the wealth in our area. And so they had to cement it, because from the very get-go, when they took over our land on the 1st of October 1961, this was the beginning. This was the beginning of the journey to get to that point. And then later on in 1982, when they changed the name from the United Republic of Cameroon to La République du Cameroun. So it was a plan from the get-go. But talk about this belief that is because of the wealth that they found, that they had to take this drastic measure, that Ahidjo had to behave as the tyrant that he is and take over Southern Cameroons.
You see, oil was discovered in the Southern Cameroons way before 1950. They knew of it, we didn't know. And the French knew and went through. Now we can really understand the schemes and the machinations in the Decolonization Committee as it related to the Southern Cameroons. And I'm talking about the Decolonization Committee between 1959 and 1961. If you read the minutes of what transpired, you will realize that in the Decolonization Committee, they did everything to try to decapitate our sovereignty. The French even took a position and argued against the Southern Cameroons being provided lawyers by the UN to advise them on the unfolding process. They wanted to keep us in the darkness of ignorance so that our sovereignty could be stolen. They attempted to do that. The final point in which they attempted to confiscate our sovereignty was in Fuman. But unfortunately for them, Foncha did not sign any document, no Treaty of Union. The Southern Cameroon's parliament did not vote to ratify anything. Britain made the mistake of, as we are finding out from declassified documents from England, Britain made the mistake of handing over power not to the Premier of the Southern Cameroons, but to Ahidjo, based on agreements that are still in the cloak of darkness. And in law, there's something they call treaties. Treaties between nations. Treaties between nations are even more powerful than articles in a nation's constitution. In fact, treaties are the highest source of law if you read about authoritative and persuasive sources of law. Treaties are the highest form of where laws emanate from. And when Britain in 1946 signed the trusteeship agreements, Britain was in fact signing a treaty with the United Nations that we're going to take this territory, we're going to govern it not for our interest, but for the interest of the people within these territories. Britain breached that treaty, and Britain got itself involved in something in law we call self-dealing. Self-dealing is when you do something in your interest rather than for the interest of the institution you represent. Case in point, if the CEO of a company auctions a fleet of 20 cars and he goes and buys 10 of them, that is self-dealing. It is not allowed in law. In any customary, statutory, common, or any form of legal jurisdiction, including international law. So Britain engaged in self-dealing by taking the authority of a territory and signing agreements in the cloak of darkness with Ahidjo, in attempting to fasten the chains of our enslavement. But there's something called light. My patience, Dr. Abiedu, if you walk into a room that is full of darkness and you take a little match and you strike it and that light comes out, suddenly that darkness dissipates. And the light of knowledge that we now have from declassified documents, from how the people of Ambazonia, from how the people of the erstwhile Southern Cameroons have been able to educate themselves through our system of education, have been able to pull ourselves up from our own bootstraps, to an extent that we have such influence now in Washington, in London, in Bonn, in Paris, in Beijing, in Pretoria, you name it. We are a people that the sun never sets on us. So the light of knowledge, the light of declassified documents, the light of the truth that is now coming to the fore is our guarantee that we are a free people. It's our guarantee that the restoration forces who are putting their lives on the line and losing blood, sweating tears, and getting limbs injured are not fighting in vain. There might be a lull in the fighting in a lot of areas, but neither Cameroon nor the international community should be mistaken that our will to fight has in any way, shape, or form been dented. It is the law before the storm. So do the right thing, come to the negotiation table. Let's discuss a separation. If you want to do it through a plebiscite that consults the will of an independent people, let's have a plebiscite in the Southern Cameroon. I am very certain that any day, any time, that they go before the ballot and ask the will of the people of the Southern Cameroon, a ballot that is conducted according to international standards and not conducted by French Cameroon, a ballot that is conducted by reputable and acceptable international institutions, Southern Cameroonians will vote to get away from that unholy union. So yes, Ahidjo did an injustice unto himself, an injustice unto French Cameroon, and an injustice unto his legacy that will forever be buried in a grave of shame.
Thank you so much, Barrister. We're going to be moving to the next topic in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to make this plea to our people watching. We're hoping that those who are Ambazonians in the home front have heard the interim government, have heard the leadership, and are honoring the 4-day lockdown, 4 days lockdown. We have not respected or honored 20th May since 2017. Why should we start now? It has already been abolished in our territory. So regardless of what La République is saying, they claim that peace has returned. There cannot be peace without justice. There cannot be peace without justice. We know, or as Barrister has already reminded us of, all the massacres, all the Mami Apis that have been killed, all our baby Marthas that have been killed. We've been reminded about that. Why will you even consider recognizing 20th May in our territory? If La République really believes that this is an important day, let them go celebrate it in their territory. But the fact is that this day should have no significance in both countries. The most important day for them should be January 1st, when they had their own independence from France. And the most important day for us is October 1st, when we had our independence from the British. So as we move to the next topic, Barrister, I don't know what you want to give your concluding thoughts on this topic, and then we'll introduce the next topic.
I'm going to give my concluding thought, and I'm going to make it brief. To those who are within the territory, to those who are within the home front, to those even who are internally displaced in Yaoundé, in Douala, and all over the foreign country of French Cameroon, to those who are displaced even in Nigeria and other African neighboring countries, just understand one thing about 20th May. 20th May is the symbol of the 9-inch nail that French Cameroon and France drove into our spine. So if there's a 9-inch nail that has been driven into your spine and you are celebrating it, then I have no more words. The only way is don't. It's a day of mourning.
Absolutely, a day of mourning, a day of mourning. All right, so the next topic has to do with the Kelman seminar. We started this topic last week, and there has been some concerns about the topic being aired on the horizon. But it's said in life that when possible, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So the purpose of the discussion on this particular topic is to educate Ambazonians that the future of Ambazonia is in our hands and not dependent on seminars or conferences convened by individuals from the international community who are already biased against us or who want to prescribe some sort of solution for us. Another goal is also to educate individuals like Dr. Susan Guise herself about this interim government, and to also explain why solutions like the Grand National Dialogue or Canadian peace process will never materialize into peace and stability in Southern Cameroons. A couple of weeks ago, Professor Epote was on the horizon. Professor Epote, the Secretary of State for Education and Strategic Collaboration, she was on the horizon. And during her show, we talked about some keywords. We talked about words like stakeholders, principal actors, leaders, presidents, communities. We described those words so that our people should have these words when they think about other aspects that are important to our quest. And one thing has to be made clear, that for Ambazonia to really achieve this permanent peace that we're looking for, the principal actor, which is the People's Interim Government and President Sako, must be a party to any discussion. So let's go ahead and talk about this Kelman seminar, because people listen to things like that and they think that that's a solution. But we want to share with you why it's good to be aware of things that are happening in your environment, but to know that the final solution has to come from the interim government. So if the video is ready to be played, they can play now. And the portion that has to do with questions and answers from that seminar is very important, because when you listen to those questions, then Barrister Ghana will be able to listen to what the response were given by this lady and what the true responses should be. So I'm hoping that that video could be played right now. In the meantime, while we wait for it, I'm not sure if you have any comments about it, Barrister Ghana, if you were able to listen to the portion before the Q&A.
Yes, I did listen to it, and I did watch it very carefully. The first thing, there's a historical truncation, which is wrong. In those two maps, or those two flags that they put from 1961 to 1975 and 1975 to present day, those flags are wrong. 1961, we had the fake Federal Republic of Cameroon right on to 1972. And then from 1972 to 1984, it was transitioned to the United Republic of Cameroon. So the two flags were dropped, but they maintained the name United Republic of Cameroon. And in 1984, Paul Biya signed a decree, what His Royal Highness von Gojidinka calls a Restoration Bill 8401. He signed a decree changing the name of the country now from United Republic of Cameroon back to its name at independence, called Republic of Cameroon. So those flags, the flags are true, but the dates emanating the transitions are wrong. And I don't think the good Dr. Suzanne Guys did that intentionally. I just think that she was fed with the wrong information. I just wanted to issue that correction. So
thank you so much. I think the video is on now. So go ahead with the video, please. It's ready.
Of the people on the ground, and what are the political issues, the economic issues that actually need to be resolved. Involvement of civil society helps ensure that focus stays on the needs of the population. And so I'm talking about women's groups, youth groups, religious actors. And by the way, there was a group of religious leaders who wrote a letter of support of the Canadian process when it was first announced. Traditional leaders remain important actors. Human rights activists and other civil society groups are very important to have their voices in some way incorporated into a peace process. With that, I will turn it back to Professor Hicks, and I will be delighted to take your questions both in English and in French. We can, I can translate any questions that we have in French.
Thank you, Suzanne. I mean, I can't tell you how instructive and informative this was for me. The details of this, you know, you get the broad strokes when you're not directly involved in a conflict such as this, but thank you for exploring all the nuances and articulating them in such an easy to understand way. I know that that's hard to do. So thank you so much. And we have many questions, and of course, as I predicted, we probably won't be able to get to all of them. And I first want to say, for the people who have asked the questions, if I mess up your name, I'm going to apologize in advance. The first question that I have, Suzanne, is from Dennis Atemkeng. What are the principles of the UN Charter that underlie our proposals for a solution?
Yes, thank you for that. And that is a name I recognize, so I'm glad you joined us, Mr. Atemkeng. You know, for better or for worse, the UN Charter doesn't say a lot about internal conflicts. In fact, it explicitly says that the UN is not to meddle in issues that are the in the, what's the language, the essential purview of the state or something like that, that are internal issues. Now, if you believe in a separate Ambazonia, you don't regard it as an internal issue. You don't regard Ambazonia as part of the Republic of Cameroon, and I understand that. But for better or worse, the international community does view it as within the existing borders of Cameroon. So I think in terms of the UN Charter, the pieces that speak to it most are around human rights and peace and security for all. And those were articulated more subsequent to the UN Charter in human rights treaties. So I would probably lean on those more in terms of how people are treated within the internationally recognized state. So I'm sorry, there is not much in the UN Charter. People talk about the principle of self-determination, but that norm was really more live around the end of colonialism. And nowadays, and since the UN Charter, the norm of territorial integrity tends to trump the norm of self-determination. I still think self-determination could be realized potentially in some way, but there's not much in the charter that says, hey, you should get independence.
Suzanne, before I move on, I was curious about how you suggested that maybe the 4th anniversary of the National Dialogue would be an opportune time to reflect and to see what was missing, what was good, and all that. Was civil society involved in that National Dialogue?
Yeah, I don't think they were invited in terms of, named stakeholder groups. I think it was more, I guess I don't know all that many details of how they were involved, but there were different commissions. I think there were 8 different commissions of the National Dialogue, each led by a number of vice presidents. Some of those came from civil society organizations. And then I think that the door was open for individuals to participate as individuals. So it was more, I guess, more akin to public meetings than stakeholder negotiations or dialogues.
Yeah. All right, thanks. And Remy Am is just adding a comment here to your explanation, an answer to the previous question. He's saying, but is it not an internal issue because there was no union treaty?
Yeah, I mean, I understand those arguments, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to those arguments that the people of the British Southern Cameroons were somewhat against their will incorporated into Cameroon. It's a bit of a similar argument to the Moro, the Muslim population of the southern Philippines. Mm. They were conquered. The sultanates of the southern Philippines were conquered, well, really not fully, but the Philippines were conquered by the Spanish. And the sultanates of the south never accepted Spanish rule, and they fairly successfully resisted it for hundreds of years.
Okay, I just wanted us to pause here, Barrister, so that you can take a jibe at that question, the first question, because it's in your field. Please go ahead.
Yeah, before I take a jibe at that first question, I want to say something that she says at the beginning of the tape, where she's talking about our plight. And she uses the word, and a lot of people make that mistake in using that word, that we are marginalized. That our plight is that we are marginalized. That our plight is that we are marginalized. Hello, we are not a people who are marginalized. We are a people who have been colonized. So let's take out that word marginalization. Our problem is not that we want some little scrums and benefits and niceties here and there. We are a people who have been colonized. French Cameroon knows that. Biya voiced it when he spoke with Mo Ibrahim. So I know her knowledge of Cameroon is limited. I know her intention is good. She is trying to understand the problem, but she is not properly educated about the problem. So our problem is not that we are or we were marginalized. She talks about the religious leaders in Cameroon who wrote in support of the Canadian initiative. Hello? How can you write in support of something that the terms are not clear to you? How can you write in support of a process where how the conduct of affairs in that process are going to be in some nebulous vacuum? So I know people are excited to hear that there's a solution in the horizon, and they are willing to support anything that looks like a credible solution. But the Canadian initiative, if Canada had manned up its balls and wanted to do a true negotiation, the first thing they should have done was go to the government of Cameroon and have them do a signed commitment to negotiations. Without a signed commitment, then you're starting a negotiation with windows and doors, or you're starting an apparition of a negotiation with windows and doors and the roof opened, where any party can decide to escape at any time. So that is DOA, dead on arrival. When Indonesia had a problem with East Timor, before they went for negotiations, they signed commitment, including guarantors of the negotiation. Australia came in as a guarantor of the outcomes of the negotiations. And that is why when Indonesia attempted to back out, there was military force brought to bear. When Indonesia attempted to back out, there was military force brought into bear to defend the outcome of the negotiations. Here with this situation in Canada, there was no agreement, no public pronouncement by the Cameroon government. No, in law, the written word is gold. In law, anything whose consequences are supposed to last beyond 1 year is supposed to be in writing. In common law, that is called the statutes of frauds, so that you cannot say something one day and come bring some witness to testify against that same thing that you said. So there was nothing that was written. So to say that these religious leaders in Cameroon wrote in support of the Canadian talk, they wrote in support of nothing. So I pardon their ignorance. The other thing he said is he talked about the situation that the international community views our situation or views us as being part and parcel of French Cameroon. And so she's trying to look for what silos or what compartmentalizations to be able to put our situation. He touches on the issue of self-determination. And then she says, in the past, in the far off gone past, something about self-determination could be considered, but now the way the nations far off past 1995, Bosnia, Croatia, Herzegovina rose against the domination of Serbia, rose against their oppression by Serbia, and through self-determination, they gained their nationhood. That is current history. That is not some far gone past. So she needs to understand global affairs, how things have evolved, and the right of Ambazonia to its statehood is 100 times stronger than the right of Serbia, of Montenegro, of Croatia, but they were able to gain our independence. Here in Ambazonia, we have a people who are backed by UN resolutions. We have a people who had already been a self-governing state since 1954. We have a people who already had a plural democracy with elections and power swinging across the political aisle. So her explanation, and again, I pardon her ignorance and I pardon her limited understanding of international affairs, is DOA, dead on arrival. And then another example, before I move on to the next point. There was a time when the international community saw Namibia as part of South Africa. Then it wasn't called Namibia. It was called Southwest Africa. They saw it as an integral part of South Africa. And the apartheid regime made that argument all over the world that they are the same people, blah, 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 this and that. It fell dead on its face. And in the early 90s, under the leadership of Sam Nujoma, who headed SWAPO, Namibia got its independence. So that whole idea that the international community views us as an integral part of French Cameroon could have been applied to Namibia, could have been applied to Croatia, to Bosnia, to Herzegovina. It didn't work then, and it is not going to work on Ambazonia. We are an independent state. We have restored our independence, and we are going to take our place in the United Nations as an independent nation.
Thank you. I'm glad you really emphasized that point, because I was concerned that she always brings it over and over that the international community sees us as part of La Republique. They see this as an internal problem. So I'm glad you've emphasized that we, go ahead.
Mape, let me also stretch something, and I'm going to piggyback to something that Thibaut Nagy said, you know. And Thibaut Nagy is a man with a very good heart, and I applaud him because he's interested in seeing the right thing. But what I noticed, or what I deduced from Thibaut Nagy, is that when Thibaut Nagy, he has friends in Cameroon who are of the Ambazonian dispensation, or they prefer to call themselves Anglophone Cameroonians. These are people whose parents moved over, and some of his friends, which I know them by name, are people whose parents sold out the Southern Cameroons. Mm-hmm. These are people whose parents sold out the Southern Cameroons. So if they speak to Thibaut Nagy, what are they going to tell Thibaut Nagy? Because they don't want to go back to a place where their grandfather or their parents sold out the Southern Cameroons. They are going to say, you know, there is some Cameroonianness in Anglophone Cameroonians that they want to give up. So they want an arrangement where they can live in the same nation. Those arrangements have to go through UN Resolution 1514 and 1608. It is not somebody's opinion of what our rights are based on what their grandfather did. It is not Thibaut Nagy's opinion based on some friendships that he himself, Thibaut Nagy, does not understand the historical foundation of those people. It is our right as enshrined in UN Resolution 1608 and 1514 XV.
All right, thank you so much. I think we can continue with the questions. I think there's another couple of great questions that you probably want to address after they play the video. Please go ahead with the video.
Yes, Dr. Patience, before I do play this video, there's something this lady said, which I would really love Barrister Ghana, based on his wealth of understanding, to explain. She said something which is so vexing. She said the right to self-determination was mostly during colonial times, and it is not really regarded or considered within the United Nations Charter. And I think that is very vexing. Please, you may want to talk on that based on legality and the historicity of our struggle.
Yeah, Paddy, thanks for injecting that question. It's very vexing, but again, I used to have a very shrewd friend who, when I was a manager at Sprint, I was a manager in telecom engineering for about 15 years, and I used to have this very astute friend of mine who always used to say, whenever there was a subject of contention, he used to say, consider the source. Consider the source. So when she says self-determination was something that lingered around colonial times and really doesn't apply now, you have to consider the source. Her knowledge of the situation is limited. And when you consider the source, Paddy, then it is not really that vexing. And when you consider more than the source, what influence she really has on the resolution of the matter, then it's not really vexing. She is just an intellectual opinionating on our situation. The case of Augustine Dangam et Kevin Goumet v. La République du Cameroun was resolved in 2009 at the African Human Rights Court in Banjul. That is an organ of the United Nations, and it is the highest judicial organ of the United Nations that has examined the case of the Southern Cameroons versus La République du Cameroon. And in that ruling, the African Human Rights Court, in Article 20 of the ruling, says the people of the Southern Cameroons are a people with a right to self-determination. In law, when they say it's your right, that is as powerful as it gets. They don't say it's a benefit. They don't say it's a privilege. They don't say it's some gratuitous donation by some party. They say it is your right to self-determination. So this ruling didn't come out of the colonial times. This ruling by the African Human Rights Court in Banjul came out in 2009. And let me tell you something. The French, and I mean France, tried by all means to try to block this ruling from coming out, and it came out. So again, regarding the comments of Lady Susan, guys, all I say is consider the source.
Thank you so much. And that's why we're having this program on ABC, Amber TV, so that the international community can really hear what we believe, what we know, and not think that we are a bunch of fools, because we have intelligent people amongst us that understand the subject matter. And we are not supposed to just sit and listen to people that, because they hold seminars, the whole conferences on this topic, what they say is gold. No, what they say is not gold. What we say is what matters. Thank you. Maybe we'll continue with the video.
And Mape, let me interject on that thought. Again, I'll go back to Thibaut Nagy. When Paddy was asking Thibaut Nagy some questions, and Thibaut Nagy said, but who will do it? How will it happen? You see, one frailty of, and again, no disrespect to Thibaut Nagy, is a person I have profound respect for. One frailty of the human condition is that we tend to view things within the purview of our own immediate understanding. We seem to see the world through our own capabilities. We seem to see the world in a limited prism based on the capabilities that we understand. And so this conflict has lasted for 6 years, and he's going, who will do it? How will it happen? Hello, the ANC was formed in 1912 by Govan Mbeki and a lot of the revolutionary leaders then. The ANC did not get power in South Africa until 1994, when Mandela was voted into power. Formed in 1912, in 1924, they could have said, who will do it? In 1940, they could have said, who will do it? In the 1950s, when Nelson Mandela was jailed, they could have said, who will do it? Coming into the 1970s and moving into the 1980s, they were pleading with Nelson Mandela to accept going into exile so that they can resolve the problem. What did Mandela say? The Freedom Charter is an ideal that I fought for, and it's a charter that I'm willing to die for. So while the international community looked at the problem in South Africa through their own limited preview, the leaders of the struggle, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, all of them, they looked at it through what was right. So when some of these intellectuals are opinionating on our situation and trying to disregard the law and trying to say, oh, UN resolutions in 1961 do not matter. They did not count. Hello, are you kidding me? We're talking about treaties in international law. We're talking about matters in international law that have the force of us getting a nation that has the power to be able to kick La République out of Ambazonia. And if they are not willing to do it, if they are not willing to stand for justice, our restoration forces are doing that. And the body bags that are going back to French Cameroon is symptomatic of that. So do not tell us that UN resolutions do not matter. Yes, they do. Do not tell us that self-determination is a concept that is consigned to the 1950s or to the colonial era. That is dead on arrival, and a falsification and lie from beginning to end.
Amen. Let's go ahead with the video.
And so when in the Treaty of 1898 that transferred, where Spain sold the Philippines to the US, they argued, well, we were never part of the Spanish Philippines, so we were not legitimately brought under US control, and therefore, we're not legitimately part of the Philippine state. So again, I understand those kinds of arguments, but for better or worse, the international community still views the Philippines as one state and still views Cameroon, including the former British Southern Cameroons, as one state. So I hear and understand the arguments. I'm not stating agreement or disagreement. I'm just saying, so far from what I've seen, that hasn't gained a lot of traction internationally.
Okay, Suzanne, this is an anonymous attendee, and the question is, has any of the conveners ever found any instrument, either in the form of a UN resolution or a treaty of union, which makes the Southern Cameroons and French Cameroon one country?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, has any of the conveners ever found any instrument, either in the form of a UN resolution or a treaty of union, which makes the Southern Cameroon and French Cameroon one country?
Okay, I think this is harking back to the same argument, that the joining of the former British Southern Cameroons with La République du Cameroun was never official, it was never agreed, it was never legitimate.
Maybe we can pause here.
Let's move on to Val Clark, who is asking, is China active here? Since
Maybe
it has seen
we can pause here
sea
so that you can
access
answer that
as a
question.
mode of greater investment to Africa's interior states, colonial influence.
All right. She says something that is very interesting. She says the international, again, this international community thing. The international community does not see that part of Philippines as part of Philippines. Neither do they see Ambazonia as separate from Cameroon. The opinion of the international community, if it's not based on justice, if it's not based on law, it's not what is going to carry the day.
Mm-hmm.
I piggyback to what Thibault Nagy said. Thibault Nagy said there is no international community. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He was speaking in code. Thibault Nagy said there is no international community. A flip side of that statement by Thibault Nagy is that the world is governed by aggressive force.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no international community that is going to come to rescue a situation. But if you bring sufficient aggressive force on the table, it's going to bend the international community. It's going to bend the edge of history. Britain claimed for about 300 years that Ireland was subject to its rulership, that Ireland was subject to its kingdom. And what did the Irish say? We don't think so. We really do not think so. And they formed the Irish Republican Army, and they were blowing the British off the streets in London. They almost killed Margaret Thatcher on 10 Downing Street. And the fight by the Irish bent the opinion of the international community. And during Bill Clinton's reign, he organized the Good Friday Agreement, where the case of Ireland was settled based on justice. So don't tell me that the international community does not understand this or does not understand that or wishes to relegate justice. The fight in Ukraine is all based on the international community recognizing what is just, recognizing that Ukraine is a sovereign nation, that Russia does not have a right to Crimea or to the Donbass. And so don't tell me that the international community does not exist. It exists when it wants to recognize right. Mm-hmm. And the world, as Thibault Nagy said, is governed by the use of aggressive force. Let me give you a case in point. Lebanon. Israel used to move its forces into the southern Lebanon willy-nilly. What did the Lebanese do? under Hezbollah, they organize resistance. And Israel does not go into the southern part of Lebanon anymore. So he says there is no international community. The flip part of that statement by Thibault Nagy is that the world is governed by the use of aggressive force. And they have given us the prescription. They have given us as Ambazonians that we are not going to come rescue you out of your injustice. That leaves us as Ambazonians in the diaspora who are in legal proximity to our people who are being killed to support them, to defend them, to send them enough assistance so that they can protect themselves. That is the concept of self-defense. So aggressive force, which Dr. Sako subscribed to, is what is going to rescue Ambazonia.
Absolutely. Ambazonians, we continue to defend ourselves and we continue to mobilize our people because the truth is on our side and justice will prevail. And one thing, based on what you just said, Barrister, there are principal actors in our quest, and the main principal actor is the interim government. That also can be applied to the international community. The phrase international community is so broad, but they have principal actors in the international community that will be relevant for Ambazonia when the time comes. They will show their head when the time comes, and it's up to us to make that happen.
And Mape, you just removed that thought from me. You and I were thinking in the same vein. We have stepped up to the fight, but we have not done enough. When they say when you point one finger, there are 3 or 4 fingers pointing back at you. And I'm also pointing at myself. There is more that we are capable of doing to bend the wheel of the international community that we haven't done. When French Cameroon rolled its troops into Ambazonia, I go back to this quote by Lapiro, where he says, chapter 1, no make error. Chapter 2, error fumbutuku nadame fondos. Chapter 3, overdone Nambut. Paddy, do you know what chapter 4 is? Mbut Nasik. So the Mbut of French Cameroon is an illness that we're going to cure them out of it by kicking them out of Ambazonia.
Okay, let's probably.
I'm so focused on producing that I didn't even bother to reply on time. I hope you're enjoying the show. I want to just say, Barrister Ghana, you are Mbuku, and that is quite kind of interesting. And also for the fact that this is an amazing program, very educative, and you have dissected the historicity and legality of Southern Cameroons like we expected it to be. And it's important. The world is watching us, and we can be the best to tell our stories. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
That's very true, Paddy. We have to tell our story.
And I embrace that one, Boko. I might be cloaked as a legal intellectual, but I have my share of the street in me. So
okay, let's get to the last part of those questions.
Will still socially active, but China's incentives are attractive to many areas of Africa.
Oh yeah, China's very active in Cameroon. It's, China is exercising influence through infrastructure is how I look at it. And the Chinese are very active in development projects in Cameroon as in many other African countries and trying to obtain more influence that way. So yes, they're
there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Emmanuel Chebe is asking, are there alternative arrangements under the radar for children to access education? The evolution of this distressing situation is understandable in terms of its history, but is intervention, like the Swiss Foreign Ministry, is intervention welcome? Is there any governmental focus on restoring education so critical for the development of future citizens?
Yes, the parties have been addressing this. On the Ambazonia side, they have set up their own separate schools Also, some religious actors, there are Catholic schools and other religious schools. The government is still trying to, the central government of Cameroon is still trying to operate its public schools. I think back to the Ambazonia side, there has been some loosening. Some of the groups are pulling away from discouraging people to go to the government schools. So it's not all children that are lacking education, and it depends what local area specifically you're talking about. So some kids have gotten back in school, but some still have not. It is really tragic. And with kids not in school, there are all kinds of impacts from that, not just loss of education, but increases in use of drugs and out of wedlock pregnancies and all kinds of things. It's horrible.
Yeah, real tragedy. So Paul Zeeby is asking, the Republic of Cameroon, and it's in quotes,
Yeah.
This is the international noun of the country in English. Saying something else is just propaganda, and it doesn't help to bring all the atrocities to an end.
Okay. So saying something else besides calling it Cameroon?
The Republic of Cameroon.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps this questioner is saying, like, let's not get hung up on symbolic issues. We have to really address the problems, which, I'm inclined to agree. But there are those who say, hey, if you call the Southern Cameroon, the former British Southern Cameroon, that is legitimizing an illegitimate government. So that's one perspective. And on the other side, if, from the perspective of those who advocate the position of the government of Cameroon, calling it Southern Cameroons, calling it Ambazonia, all of that is illegitimate. So that's back to the contested legitimacy. But I am certainly for trying to solve the underlying problems as opposed to getting hung up on symbolic issues. But symbolic issues are very important for many.
And a PS to his question is, don't you think this issue is a constitutional issue and should end up with a constitutional response, including, for example, a constitutional amendment on the form of the state?
Yeah, the form of the state is kind of the big question here. That's the phrase that is used, is what is the form of the state? Will it be unitary? Will it be special status, federalism, et cetera? And so, yes, that is the ultimate core question that should be resolved through, I think, should be resolved through negotiation. And there are other issues as well that have to deal with people's more day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
Here's
another anonymous question, Suzanne. What are the conditions for such crises to?
Okay, she talks about the problem being a problem of the form of the state. Form of which state? I mean, which state are you talking about? Are you talking about the state of French Cameroon or the state of these are two separate states. And if it's the form of the state, that is the problem of the Republic of Cameroon. Their name, which they had in 1961, 1st January, La République du Cameroun, the Republic of Cameroon. If they want to massage their state, fix their constitution, do a unitary state, do a federalism amongst themselves, we have no business in that. It's their right to determine whatever governing construct they want in their state. But if you are talking about this form of the state as involving Ambazonia or the erstwhile Southern Cameroons, then that thought is as wrong can be, because these are two separate states. This is a problem of one state annexing the other. This is a problem of colonialism. Ambazonia is Africa's last colony that has not been decolonized. So let's not say it's the form of some state trying to weave Ambazonia into French Cameroon. It's like you have a shirt. Again, let me go back to this example. It's like you have a shirt and you mismatch the first button and then you continue. And then you come down and you say, oh, we're just going to fix that problem by adjusting the 7th and the 8th button. You're as foolish can be. Hello. Even the United States Senate has recognized in Senate Resolution 684, Article 4, that this problem has to be resolved consistent with the root causes of the problem.
Absolutely.
So it's not about the form of the state. The root of the problem is not about the form of the state. If she had done enough of her research, if she had read U.S. Resolution 684, passed by the Senate of her own country, she would have realized that the problem is not about the form of the state. The problem is about the root causes of the conflict. And the root causes of the conflict is the non-implementation of UN Resolution 1514 and 1608 as it applies to Ambazonia, aka the erstwhile Southern Cameroons.
Amen to that. Nothing to add to that. Well said, Barrister. We'll be transitioning probably to the last question and then we'll round up. I'm not sure if the last question is still relevant on the topic. Go ahead.
And Mape, the other thing, when you explain this thing to people, if you explain it to somebody, we had a presentation with Senator Dick Durbin in Chicago in 2019. Before that presentation, I printed all of these UN resolutions and I highlighted the respective paragraphs. And I did a simple 15 minutes presentation to Dick Durbin. And he promised us that he was going to take this issue to the US Senate. So this thing is very easy. That is why French Cameroon is running away from the negotiation table. That is why they are running helter-skelter with their tails between their legs. Because they know they have no case. Because they know that they are an occupying power.
Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Paddy, you can proceed.
To be discussed at the UN Security Council. I see how the UN always convene whenever crises as such erupts. Sudan, DRC, Ethiopia. Is Cameroon different?
Oh, such a great question. It is so baffling why this has not been on the agenda of the Security Council. And okay, I will acknowledge there was one meeting called an ARIA formula meeting, which is UN speak for, this isn't really a Security Council meeting. It's just kind of a little talk, a little thing. There was, and that was, I think, in early 2019, maybe earlier. But basically, it has not been on the agenda. And the whole thing is baffling, and why this conflict gets so little attention. I have been following with a very heavy heart the recent violence in Sudan. And that could be, I could spend more time talking about that. It's an incredibly important issue. And I'm glad that I'm seeing things about it on CNN and in the Washington Post. But at the same time, I'm like, why hasn't Cameroon and this crisis gotten more coverage, and why hasn't the Security Council picked it up? Explanations I've heard are the international community needs Cameroon in the Lake Chad Basin to counter the Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Province. So it's part of the counterterrorism drive. Secondly, Cameroon receives and has welcomed refugees from Central African Republic. And so, their international community is sort of grateful for that. Paul Biya's age, at least among Africans, there is a very strong norm of respecting your elders. And so in the African Union, I'm answering a different question, the African Union rather than the UN. But in the African Union, some say, well, he's the sort of great granddaddy of the African leaders. And so, we can't sort of, it's not appropriate to challenge him too much. The French have always somewhat protected their former colonies. Those of you who know much about the Rwandan genocide know that at least initially the French were kind of protecting the government that turned out to be pretty complicit in the genocide. So these are some of the explanations I've heard.
Yeah,
Okay, let's go ahead.
and Boniface Noyon-Goya asks, well, you've already addressed the UN, but he's saying where.
Okay.
All right.
She poses a question. She says, why is this stuff not occupying the headlines? Why is it so relegated as compared to other conflicts around the world? Why is the UN not involved? Why has this not been cabled in the UN Security Council? Well, that UN Security Council meeting that she's talking about, the Arias Forum, occurred in, I think, around May, June of 2019. And in that Arias Forum, where they addressed the issue of the Southern Cameroons, there was a vote of, I think, 11 against 4, that they voted in favor of getting involved in the situation and resolving it. Who was one of the countries that voted against? And this was in the 15-member extended body of the United Nations Security Council. France and 3 of other francophone inclined states, and 11 states, well, 10 states voted in favor of taking it, and China abstained. So, so this has been handled at the peripheries by the UN Security Council. Also, she's saying, you know, again, it goes back to what Thibon Nagy said. Thibon Nagy said a lot of things. He did not come out outright, where he said there is no international community. Again, Thibon Nagy was saying the world is governed by the use of aggressive force, and everything happens consistent with the interplay of interest. Everything happens with the interplay of interest. Let's go to Ivory Coast. 2010, 2011, Gbagbo has this dispute with Alassane Ouattara, a few hundred, maybe a couple of thousand killed. France lobbies the UN to pass a resolution so that France can get involved. A situation not as serious as the situation in Ambazonia. Let's fast forward again to, I think, about 2000 and late in 2011, where we had the Arab Spring. There's a revolt in Benghazi. Gaddafi's forces are clamping down on the revolt in Benghazi. The Western nations go, oh my God, civilians are gonna die in Benghazi. We have just a few hundred there. We cannot let Gaddafi go kill people in Benghazi. What are we gonna do? Let's pass UN Resolution 1971 that authorizes force on Libya. Hello? The world is governed by the use of aggressive force based on the interplay of interest. But no condition is permanent. Things are changing. We are upping our game, and we need to up our game even more. And the French are also making missteps. We just saw the position that France took on Taiwan, saying, hey, Taiwan is not a European issue. If the Americans want to battle that out, that is their problem. You think America is going to continue to back France all over Africa? You think we cannot now go to US senators and say, here you are, backing France in Libya, backing France in the Ivory Coast. In Cameroon, France is certainly wrong. Why are you backing France when France will not even talk straight regarding Taiwan? So the international community is changing. The international climate is changing, and we are noticing it. And we will lobby the international community where that aggressive force applies based on the interplay of our own interest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barrister Ghana. You have really, really been a great guest on The Horizon today. And we just want to share with the audience and viewers that this particular seminar that aired in April this last month on our matter is something that we want to bring to light so that people understand what is going on. It's not that we endorse what they are saying. On the contrary, we want to share with you the manipulation of the so-called international community. And as Barrister Ghana said, everything has to do with interest. everything has to do with interest. But then we have to make sure that we put our own interest first, and we are firm about what our interest is, and the international community will follow us and make Ambazonia the 55th nation in Africa. The one more thing about, we talked about 20th May today, and we know that it's a day that should really, in the near future, not be in our vocabulary. It's a day that is dead and buried. It's a day that we know is a manipulation of La Republique. And they think that because they're claiming peace has returned to Ambazonia, in fact, we've seen some audios and pictures of them celebrating it 3 or 4 days in advance before the real date, just to show that they don't have that control of our territory to go and have that day celebrated in our territory. So we are saying this for all viewers. You know, Barrister Ghana, I just want you to, because we're ending the show, to give a special message to French Cameroonians that are watching this program, because they do watch this program. What is your French Cameroonians that are watching this program?
I want to give a special message to French Cameroonians, and I think it's very relevant to give that special message on this day. And it's a global message. One of the countries in the world that has the highest amount of productivity per capita is Japan. If you look at Japan, a nation the size of Cameroon, with a population of about 120 million, Japan has no resources. But if you look at the automobile companies in the world that are dominant, Toyota, Honda, Matsushita, Subaru, Mazda, Suzuki, about 8 of them are all Japanese companies. Mm-hmm. So what is embedded in this message? The ability of a people to govern themselves according to just terms leads to increased productivity that will even outshine those natural resources. If you look at Nigeria, where there has been the return of democracy, where Nigerian music is becoming very, very popular, where we are now having businessmen like Aliko Dangote that are dominating in cement production, and now he's going into oil, building oil, an oil refinery that is going to be that is going to be producing the largest amount of refined oil per day in the world. That has gone into fertilizer production, where they are dominating fertilizer production in the world. All of these are happening because of the possibility of the rule of law. The rule of law is something that separates man from a beast. It's something that allows the proper governing and the interplay between persons. But if you have a nation, and I'm speaking to French Cameroonians, if you have a nation where the rule of law cannot be properly planted, that becomes a huge disincentive to foreign investment. That becomes a huge disincentive to ingenuity within the nation, because people cannot create, because there's the absence of law. And if you look across Africa, and you look at the nations that have been able to transition to democracy and to good governance, Tanzania, Ghana, Botswana, Namibia, Kenya, and a whole others, you realize more economic activity being generated, which is good for the people. So again, to French Cameroon, you have been deceived. For 61 years, you have not had a leader that you elected into power. Ahidjo was imposed onto you guys by fraud, and the lucky underachiever Biya was imposed and has been sustained by fraud and force, partly through the influence of the French. So today in French Cameroon, this is also supposed to be a day of mourning. It's a day of sadness, because it deprives French Cameroonians of their own ingenuity. It deprives French Cameroonians from the ability to create a constitution that they can live by, to create a democracy where they can vote competency into power. Because without competency, you have underachievers who are selected or nominated into power. So this day is a day of sadness for French Cameroon. So there is absolutely nothing to celebrate. When you see those roads that cannot be fixed, think of days like 20th May. When you see garbage bins that are stinking in Yaoundé, in Douala, in Marua, think of 20th May. When electricity switches off in Yaoundé because competency and meritocracy has taken a backseat, think of days like the 20th May. When you see injustice, where somebody like Martinez Zogo is killed like a dog, think of 20th May. When you hear of ministers looting money, where they can go keep mistresses in hotels for 100 days, for a whole year, when they are not even stopping by that hotel, think of 20th May. When you think of a nation as French Cameroon that is rotten to the core, think of 20th May. So even for French Cameroon, this is not a day of celebration. When you think of parents having to send their kids out of the country at a tender age to go succeed someplace else because the country has no fertile foundation where they can stay and grow and create and prosper, think of 20th May. So even for French Cameroon, this should be a day of mourning. But for Ambazonia, this is a day and a reminder for us that we need to be free. That however long it takes, that however much the price we have to pay, we will pay it. That French Cameroon made the mistake when it sent forces into an independent and sovereign state to try to quell us. That they thought it was going to take 3 weeks. And prior to 2017, Ambazonians did not even have a gun to fight with. And through that invasion of Ambazonia, we now have shoulder-fired missiles. We now have AK-47. We now have bees. For example, I was speaking to a friend who is doing some stuff around the Idinao area, that the bee camp there, they don't even want to go into the territory anymore because they are afraid of getting killed. That the situation has changed. That Ambazonia is not a place that welcomes colonial masters. And that consistent with the law of self-defense, we in the diaspora are obligated. We are called upon to help our restoration forces who are there to defend themselves. And to the restoration forces, to those who have taken up arms, it's also a day to inform them that we should not terrorize our own civilians. We should not bring pain to our own civilians. We should not kidnap our own civilians. We should not bring duress to our own civilians. And though we understand that there is collateral damage in any war, we will conduct ourselves. The restoration forces should conduct themselves in ways that are worthy of the cause. But so long as it comes to the sovereignty of Ambazonia, so long as it comes to the independence of Ambazonia, so long as it comes to us as an independent state, some of us have dedicated our lives. Some of us have invested our futures to ensure that Ambazonia shall be free. That though some intellectuals and some statesmen in some other nations might not believe in Ambazonia, we know UN Resolution 1608 and 1514 emphasize and guarantee the independence of Ambazonia. And though La Republique might be trying to steal our independence, and though certain thoughts and speculations might be thinking that we are part and parcel of La Republique, we know very differently. We know we are an independent people. And to French Cameroonians again, some of us see what is coming. There is no transition plan. And when you have a dictator without a transition plan, with ministers having stolen money, where it is winner takes it all, we're looking at impending doom. The plagues of Egypt are looking towards visiting French Cameroon. So this is a day of mourning. But for us Ambazonians, we say we are free, we shall be free, and by all means necessary, we shall do what it takes to free Ambazonia from the fangs of French colonialism. Thank you, Dr. Abiedu. Thank you, Comrade Paddy. I know you guys are doing a great job. I know you guys are dedicating a lot of time, but to all Ambazonians in the diaspora who are watching, emulate the sacrifices of these two valiant heroes. If you haven't paid your draft, do it voluntarily. If their contribution to help heal our restoration forces, to help our struggling parents, to help our refugees in foreign lands, chip in and do that. The only reason why Canada can step up to the plate to try to negotiate, the only reason why Gunter was appointed as a mediator through the Swiss government is because the barrel of the guns are sounding in Ambazonia. And though that lady in that interview said there are no international instruments, no laws that talked about intervening to support people who are trying to gain self-determination, Article 72A and B of the UN Charter specifically speak on settling problems in ways that do not pose a threat to the sub-region. And let me expand a little bit. We just saw the Japanese foreign minister, what was his name? Yoshimasa Hayashi, travel to Europe to try to get Europe or NATO to open an office in Tokyo. What does that tell you? That tells you that regional issues are no longer regional anymore. That regional issues are pregnant with the ability to destabilize the internal globe. Today it is Ukraine. Tomorrow it might be Ambazonia. So we will not compromise by having this problem settled less than by adhering to the spirit and the letter of UN Resolution 1608 and 1614. Because that, by all means, is the right of Ambazonia. That, by all means, is our right. And by all means, it is our rightful inheritance. Thank you, comrades.
Wow. Thank you so much, Barrister Ghana. You have been a phenomenal guest today on The Horizon. And borrowing from what you said, I just want to say that for the people of French Cameroon watching this, let them think about their thousands of sons and daughters who have been killed also by La Republique in the name of being military or bees that are going into our territory to fight for something that they don't even understand, for something that they don't believe. Think about that and know that 20th May is nothing for you to be proud of. I recently learned something from someone that there's a word known as grit, G-R-I-T. G-R-I-T. And that is what will take our Southern Cameroons to finally get to that recognition as a 55th nation. It's not just intelligence, it's not just money, it's the stamina, the resolve that we have. And that resolve is because we believe in truth and justice. In the Bible, it says, the truth shall set you free. The truth has already set Ambazonians free, regardless of what the international community may say. The ball is in our court, and it's up to us to make it happen. So I want to thank you all for watching The Horizon, the voice of the Amber Woman. Still tuned for our next program next week on The Horizon. We'll have a new guest for you for another exciting topic. God bless you. Long live the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. And please remember 20th May is dead and buried in Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. Goodbye for now.
I am Ambassador Henry Forson, and I want to make a few things right. What the leader of our war, Samuel Sarko Ekame, has explained this morning about referendum, I do agree with him, but I would want to make some records straight. We are a country recognized by the United Nations in a way because the International Court of Justice, ICJ, decided to keep our frontiers safe for us by the request and the writing I made in 1994. And there was a Green Tree Agreement in our territory that the International Court of Justice requested Nigeria and La République to agree that they cannot in any way occupy our territory. Because they know that we did achieve the basic objective of the trusteeship system. We were a trusteeship territory, a child of the United Nations. I shall get time to expand on all this for you to know. We are two countries here. Unfortunately for us, even though they tried in all ways, people tried to push us into the arm of La République with all fraud. They have failed because La République has rejected us in quite a good number of times. I think the war that they brought on us is one of those rejections, and that makes the fifth rejection. The resolution 1608 of the United Nations is a non-starter. That's why I've been calling it a resolution that is null and void. Why? Because Great Britain did not allow our people to participate in it, knowing that we were going to accept to do only what was right. And then, of course, La République du Cameroon and France, their master, voted no against it. When you vote no against a law, that law cannot bind you if your no is accepted and is a principle in accepting or denying that resolution. I could elaborate if there be time. Secondly, this war is meant to do two things. Mr. Biya himself declared that they had tried to assimilate us and failed. It is because they failed to assimilate us by all intrigues and fraud that they decided to wage a war of genocide and annexation. You can see the way they are fighting it. Look at the way they kill our people in Bali. They poisoned them. Look at the way they destroy our villages. Look at the way they have killed us. Look at how they treat pregnant women. And they don't have any feeling for us at all. They have never had it. So therefore, the United Nations knows that we are a free people. Even if you take that resolution, you can see some of the examples of the acceptance that we are a free people. I will elaborate someday. And I think for today, it is enough to say that we are two nations before God and man. We have never had any legal sanction between us since that we started. That we should note. It is right, our brave boys and girls, our sons, great sons, and those making sure that they guide them and provide for them as Sako is doing. I dock my hat to all of you and continue to do what you're doing. No one will take what is ours away. You have decided you're using your bodies to take bullets from an enemy. Don't change it. La République cannot be party to a case and is allowed to be a judge in the same case. We cannot accept it, and we will never accept it. Long live the state of the Sultan Cameroons, a sovereign country from 1954. Congratulations to our sons and daughters. You are winning every battle. God is with you. He will continue to be with us till Sako and his interim government guards us to Buea. Congratulations, Sako. Continue.
You are watching The Horizon, the voice of the Amber Woman, exclusively on ABC Amber TV.